Okay, and we're live. Okay, good evening, everyone. It's Deacon Joseph Swaden. I'm here with Craig Trulia. This is I'm kind of excited about today. This is kind of awesome. What I've learned or what I've read. But in any case, you'll notice my link there is for Odyssey.com. We are still trying to get that Odyssey channel up and running, even though I haven't figured out the chat yet. And we will be copying this to Gab TV, which does allow for uploads now, but does not allow for live broadcasting. So we are still on YouTube. Today is a very interesting episode, which is why I invited Craig, because I figured I'll invite an experienced apologist on this. Okay, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's going on there. I hear some typing.
Yeah, it's your audio is pretty bad.
How bad is it? Wow. Okay, that's terrible.
It's pretty bad. The mic is a little robotic, according to the Orthodox Albanian.
Okay, I'm sorry to hear this. I am not sure what I'm going to do. Let me try one last thing. It's the only thing I can do at this point, but it's going to introduce a whole bunch of other noise potentially.
You even got family. You got family members complaining. Xenia Swaden says, "Can you switch out the mic?"
I'm trying to switch it out again. Hold on. All right.
You gotta love the Orthodox Apologetics channel. You gotta just love the tech issues that are live. It's the real deal. That's what I like about it.
Well, I'm glad we keep it raw here, but
yeah, keeping it real raw.
Doesn't get more raw than this. Okay, but in any case, yesterday there was a big announcement, or the day before, technically, from Uncut Mountain Press, and it was a surprise for me because it was a book from Robert Spencer, and I was like, "Why is Robert Spencer publishing on Uncut Mountain Press?" So I went and I looked, and it was a book about a topic we commonly talk about, which is the case for Orthodoxy to Roman Catholics. I was really surprised because I don't know. Are you familiar with Robert Spencer, Craig?
No, not at all.
Okay, well, I'm gonna help you with that. One moment, and we're gonna share the screen. Robert Spencer has been running a website called Jihad Watch for approximately, I think it's over a decade. He's a New York Times best-selling author. His latest book from Simon and Schuster was actually an annotated critical Quran called the Critical Quran, which, of course, I will happily share on the screen as well. So he's a big writer. He's pretty well known in the Christian apologetics community when it comes to Islam. He's, I would say, probably the most knowledgeable person in the English-speaking world on Islam. What I didn't know, however, was that he was Orthodox. And so that was actually a surprise. He was originally born Orthodox, and then he joined the Melkite Catholic Church, but returned to Orthodoxy in 2016. I had no idea that he was Orthodox because he runs in circles that are usually primarily Protestant. But here we are. Either that or there's a lot more Orthodox apologists than we know of. But that brings us to yesterday's, or the day before yesterday's, publication, which I am going to share on screen right now. And that is his newest book. It's a small book, but it's really, really good, entitled The Church and the Pope, The Case for Orthodoxy. And so he basically goes through, you'll see it's a short book in print. It's only 112 pages. So it's a small book. I have, of course, the ebook version because, as I've advertised a million times, I have a very tiny library, and that is because I have been involved on the internet for 20-something years, and I'm pretty used to reading my books online. So I got the e-publication with your first purchase from Uncut Mountain Press. I am not advertising. I'm not a paid advertisement here. I've spoken to Father, I think, once, and I think I met him once in chat. But it's just a nice thing to know when you do purchase a book from Uncut Mountain Press. I had not done that previously. You get 2 free books with it. So there was, so that was kind of awesome. So I got 3 books for the price of 1 small book. Now, getting back to the story, the review at hand. Let's I'm going to switch this. Hold on. And Okay, we're going to switch to The Church and the Pope, The Case for Orthodoxy is a very straightforward book. I don't know if you've noticed this, Greg, but I think you've probably seen that with apologetics books that deal with Rome and the case for Orthodoxy, they're either really, really big or they're really small and technical. So this book is neither of those, which is nice. It's the happy middle in between. It takes the basic positions of the early church fathers. It references St. Cyprian, St. Irenaeus, St. Ignatius, so on and so forth, but it actually engages the texts. It goes through the ecumenical councils, and very, in short order, and I'll see if I can show a little example here because I have my ebook reader open. And so let me do that, and we're going to get that out so we can take a look at it, because it's a great book. It's much smaller in the EPUB version, because if you're familiar with ebooks, like one page can actually be like 25 pages. So it's total. So on the EPUB, it looks like it's 27 pages, but it's like 27 websites, really. But give me just a moment and let me share that, because it's kind of awesome. I was shocked to find out that Robert was Orthodox. His tone against Islam is polemical. It is unabashedly polemical, and it should be. I found that this is really careful, because Robert was a Roman Catholic for a very long time. He references Robert Madrid. He references James Lacutus, people he knew personally in the apologetics community. And, you've run into a couple of those yourself, I'm sure, Greg. And so let me see if I can figure out how to do this. Okay. So, yeah, I got the book up. And so basically, it's very ironic in tone. It's really written from the perspective of somebody who was a Roman Catholic, who is sympathetic, but at the same time, the points that he makes are fairly unassailable, and we've covered virtually all of them in much, much longer shows. So to see this in a small book is actually really kind of impressive. It's something that, honestly, like, I don't want to say it's the book you would hand, quote unquote, your Catholic friend, but that's really it's really written for that. It's written with love, with concern, and most of all, it's a great demonstration of what the fathers believed on the role of Peter in the church in terms of the episcopate. So he covers, as you can see, here's the table of contents. It's a personal note where it talks about his own conversion. It's kind of great that way. You can tell this was a book written, unlike, say the Critical Quran or something like that. There's no polemic bone in his body here. He's just putting out the truth, and he's kind of doing it in a really kind way, because he was on both sides. He was born Orthodox. I assume he was probably Antiochian then. I'm guessing because of the interest in Islam, and B, the fact that he goes to the Melkites. So I'm going to assume he's probably Antiochian.
And the last name Spencer.
Well,
a bit Arabic, right?
Spencer is no. Well, that's a lot of I know this from personal experience and knowing people. A lot of people in Arabic communities that moved to the U.S., they Americanized their name or took a much more American sounding name. Perfect example. We always talk about the wacky Archbishop Gregory of Colorado. He lists himself as Gregory George. And George is a very common Arab Christian last name for immigrants. For example, the mayor of Wilkes-Barre, which is not far from me, was Tony George. He was also, but the real family name in Gregory of Colorado's case is Abu Asali. So they took more American names. So it's possible Robert Spencer is himself an Arabic Christian. That while he was an Arabic Christian, he was a Roman Catholic, but he was also Orthodox. So that my guess is that he was probably Antiochian. But that's, again, maybe marginally racist to guess. But so anyway.
Oh, that's when you got to pull that you're part Arab card.
Exactly. I got the name Swade, and I can do that. Yeah. You got the race card covered. All right, let's get back to the book. So anyway, we're gonna go past a personal note since we've kind of just covered that and destroyed it. So let's go to here's a good example. He, like his approach, actually, we'll just use the first chapter because his approach was actually kind of cool there. The first chapter is he goes through, as you can see here, the problem of authority. He goes through some basic stuff. Scripture doesn't interpret itself, but then he starts going into these scriptures here. I know this is going to be of interest, and he covers everything, as you can see, in a really straightforward manner. Nothing that surprises us here, but we've been doing this for years. This is kind of a really good book for a mildly knowledgeable Roman Catholic, a decently knowledgeable Roman Catholic who wants to learn about Orthodoxy. It's a really fantastic book that way. It's very simple, straightforward. It's really not exactly what I expected at all, because Robert Spencer goes off when it's Islam. So I was kind of expecting it to be like raw, like something I would write, to a Roman Catholic. But it wasn't. It was really, really nice, kind, ironic. Just a really, it was written in a very kind way and an awesome, very clear. He covers all the major issues that you'll hear a Roman Catholic cover in one small, efficient book. That's awesome. As I mentioned, let's see, it does the other books that it came with hold on. Peace, Hope, and Joy. These come free when you order from Uncut Mountain Press. So that's 23 Spiritual Insights from St. Paisius. And then there's this book by Father Athanasius Mitilianos. So it's worth it just, because it's a great little book. But I honestly, even though I bought the ebook, this is one of those books, honestly, I feel like you ever, those little books and pamphlets you have in the front of the church, to attract people. I would tell anyone, order 3 or 4 of these, put them in the front. It's so worth it because it's just well done. I read that book in a sitting. I recommend, if you haven't ordered it, it's great because it's very centering. When it comes to the discussion of how, the differences between Orthodoxy and Roman Catholicism and the question of authority, he covers it with kindness, but with clarity. I cannot recommend this book less. I mean, more. It's fantastic. In any case, what do you think? I mean, have you managed to get a copy of the book yet?
No, I'm just here for color commentary.
Okay.
I haven't read the book.
I haven't sold you on it. No.
We talked about it last night. It's just I didn't have the time to bring the family to the county fair, go to Vespers, bring them to church, do all these things. So yeah, it's just been too busy. I do have on Friday night with John Colarafi. We're going through the 2nd century of the history of the papacy. So obviously, this is a topic
you should recommend
that I'm dealing with in detail.
Yeah, this is great. The book is very well done. Let me see if I can get back to the table of contents. Yeah, and so you see it covers the pre-Nicene period, Nicene Constantinople. It's obviously, I'm going to not totally there's some good stuff on the St. Photius and the whole disagreement there in the 9th century. I don't know, and I have, now that I think about it, I might have actually not read this chapter yet, but I'm going through it because this is the standard discussion of St. Photius. And let me see here, and this is kind of skips over. See, now for me, that I don't consider that a weakness. It is, I think, knowing the whole how Rome fell apart in the 11th century. Books need to be written on that. I don't think that was the purpose of this book, and I think that, frankly, it is a really complicated topic simply because of the amount of biased scholarship on the issue and lack of primary source commentaries. So I was not expecting him to even touch the Hildebrandians, etc. That would just be too much, and I think that would be, in a sense, a little bit cruel to an inexperienced Roman Catholic. So it would be kind of it's a good book to give to somebody, to, again, your Catholic friend. And shoot, I'd say even, I think it's definitely. I'm surprised and kind of. I'm glad for this book, and I'm glad I bought it. I recommend it highly.
But how would it be useful against a lot of the pop Roman Catholic apologetics? So, like, let's say reason and theology, the meaning of Catholic, the sort of arguments that they're going to be bringing up.
I think that one of the things that I like about the book is that it delves upon the issue sufficiently where it makes the point. So, like, say for example, it brings up the second, I think it's the Second Ecumenical Council, where there were no Roman legates. That's a simple fact of history. That won't stop, say, Michael Lofton from coming up with a massive excuse box for it. It's not meant to answer. It's not meant to answer Michael Lofton. It's not meant to answer like the hardcore pop apologists. It's meant to give facts. And one thing that I do like about it is if somebody does read this book, there's enough things for them to research that they'll get better informed about it. It's not meant to be an exhaustive history. It's 112 pages in print. So it's not a big thing like that. It's not meant to be used as I would say it's more of an evangelical book than it is an apologetical book, because it really just lays out facts. There's a lot of apologetics in there, but there's a lot of patristic history, and that's well done. I think it's more of the Catholic Answers level type people, the folks that they get a quote and they think that's it and that's the answer. It's not meant for, like, I'm not handing this to Eric Ibarra and expecting that he'll just be like, oh, of course this is true. No, he'll probably write like a 10-page response to every line, and even though it is true, it's an experienced papal apologist. This book is not for. This is for regular, plain old ordinary Orthodox who want to understand their faith.
I've noticed this with papal apologetics, especially in the last year, where they've become much more just dogmatic. The Pope says it, that settles it. The history has become irrelevant. And so it's been real interesting for me to see for the last 10 years following apologetics that the card Roman Catholics would pull on, let's say, Protestants would be to understand history is to cease to be Protestant, right? They would say, if you are steeped in church history, you're going to realize all these Protestant things are innovations and they're not in the church fathers, and that shows that you don't have an historic faith, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it appears that Orthodoxy has become this sort of football both for Protestants and Roman Catholics to appeal to one another against each other.
Mm-hmm.
And now that, at least on the internet, sort of a Ron Paul effect, like we're bigger on the internet than we are in the real world, at least in the West. But now that Orthodoxy is part of the conversation, you're starting to see a lot more nakedly obvious statements from Roman Catholic apologists, which would be like, we don't have to be a historical faith. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if this doesn't exist in history. And it's very interesting to see that. And so how does that relate to this book?
Well, that's
like a book like this would be like a good intro to history in a sense for like the normal person. This is where the Orthodox stuff, why we believe this. And yes, like you said, like experienced papal lawyers going to try to, would get more complicated than what the audience of a 120-page book would be. But ultimately speaking, I think you don't want to miss the forest in the trees. If the papal apologists in dialogue with Orthodox have already given up on the history. They won't with the Protestants because they'll keep pulling the card of the Protestants, but it's an inconsistency. Being that they've already given up on the history with the Orthodox, I've heard allegations that, oh, you're like the Protestants, you're like sola patristica,
that makes even less sense, because then you're talking about 1900 years of writings, not a book.
Yeah, it's like they'll actually speak negatively about people that cite the fathers, and they say, well, the questions of authority, and they'll hinge everything on authority. Then well, why don't you make the argument with Protestants then? Because they'll hinge their whole argument on authority as well. They just have a different authority. And at least the scriptures are an authority, which we both share. So it's like I said, it's been interesting to see. So like a book like this, because it's more basic with traction, could get papal apologists to engage in the history and try and refute it. But in so doing, they then validate the fact that Orthodoxy and Christianity itself is an historic faith. And that puts them in trouble on so many issues. For example, the Immaculate Conception and issues to that effect, where they don't have an historical basis for their doctrines.
I absolutely agree. That is, if you look at papal apologetics, 20 years ago, everything was, this is the faith of the fathers. You don't hear that anymore. And the reason you don't hear that anymore is because of the fact that they know they know what they really mean is this is the faith of a later interpretation of John Henry Newman, which doesn't quite have the same ring to it. So a book like this is great because it really centers.
Deacon Joseph, tell me if you've experienced this in apologetics. The arguments against you begin with just different understandings of history. Then, like when they lose those arguments, they go into, well, you need doctrinal development.
Yeah.
And then when you show the inconsistency, doctrinal development, and then just goes into personal attacks in your personal life, right? It's like there's nothing left to defend my point of view. So I'm just going to invalidate your point of view because you're a flawed human being. And so that to me just shows how bankrupt the apologetics really is.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I think that what ends up happening, based on my experience, a lot, and granted, there have been very few Roman Catholic apologists reaching out to me, except some of the weirder, fringy types recently. But really, they know that the most experienced ones know that doctrinal development is the hill they have to die on. Because if they do not die on that hill, they'll just get floored by just the sheer amount of historical knowledge that Orthodoxy brings to the table. So they're going to be focused 100% on proving doctrinal development. And the beauty of this book is that it almost completely glosses over that with just straight history. So if you are still believing that the church is the church of the fathers, you're going to come finish it. You're going to read this book and, like Robert himself, gratefully, most likely rejoin the Orthodox Church, because it's that's where people need to be. I think that's becoming more and more obvious with time.
That is interesting, because obviously a lot of Orthodox that have been brought up in the faith in a superficial way, or they just ran into bad personal experiences, could be convinced of Roman Catholicism because of these historical arguments if they haven't heard good defenses of Orthodoxy. I debated, for example, an ex-Greek Orthodox person on Nicaea II, and that's pretty much his life story. And it takes a lot of humility after thinking you're wrong once, and then swimming in the Roman current and realizing, wait, it's not me aligning with the history like I thought when I got into this. I have to start buying into this, these theories of Newman, these theories of epistemology, which I don't see in history whatsoever.
Yep.
So it is very interesting for someone who gets in for the right reasons, right? Gets into the wrong place for the right reasons. Then they realize they can't stay because they always had the right reasons all along. I think
that actually shows really well in this book, because if there's one thing I can describe, the author's tone, having seen a lot, he writes articles, a lot of stuff. He's written, as I said, New York Times bestsellers. But one thing I can say about this book is this is a book written by somebody who's been humbled. And that is an amazing thing by itself. Just the humility and the tone makes it it is a humbled but honest, affirmative packaging of Orthodox history, which is very rare.
I just want to make a quick comment, because you made a statement, and just for those listening, when there's an assertion that's made that there was no Roman legate at Constantinople I, I don't know what side that's supposed to be good for, whether it's good for us or good for Rome. But people should just be aware of this, that Ascolius of Thessalonica, he was pretty much the spiritual father to Saint Theodosius. He baptized him. He did attend the council, and he was kind of asserted to be the legate. And we have a letter from St. Ambrose, I think it's letter 14, where St. Ambrose says, you can't consider him our legate because we haven't had a council in the West to review it. So it's that doesn't settle the answer, but it's arguable for both sides. Just
I think that I understand. And again, it is not what I would call detailed, heavily detailed on those issues. I mean, yes, there is the question of the See of Thessalonica, which at times acted as sort of an Eastern Metopia of Rome. So I don't disagree with you there, but it is an interesting point because it's hammered throughout any basic Roman Catholic reading of history that the Pope gives permission to ecumenical councils, which isn't historically really true.
No,
it was the emperor, but the point is to have it simply in black and white, affirmatively shown, opens the door to the discussion. It would force an Eric Guevara or a Michael Lofton to have to say, well, what about this particular person at Thessalonica? But at the very least, the door is open where we're now talking about a different kind.
Well, how would they address the issue of sacra? It's like an actual genre of literature. When the emperor convokes a council, it's called a sacra. Maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong in sacra, but it's SACRA. There really shouldn't be any doubt as to how these councils were convened. I mean, there's a whole genre of literature for it.
Well, I know. And from our perspective, and this is one of the things that I did like about this book, we read a lot. When it comes right down to it, people in apologetics who are doing it, especially if you're using the patristic method, do a lot of reading. And when you do a lot of reading, you have to look up a lot of details. You have to look up, really get into it. Most people don't do that. And I don't think this was written for us. The beauty of it is I think it was written for regular people. Not that we're not regular people, but you know what I mean. Not nerds. Just like people who maybe just go to church. That's why I say it's a really good book to have in the name there. So it's handy. But
so what would you say were the 3 best arguments made in this book?
I would probably say, well, first off, the best arguments that I read were probably the biblical arguments that you find in the second chapter. Let me just go back to my e-reader here. So I would say, like, the role of Saint Peter in the New Testament is definitely lays out, I'd say, the biblical arguments. So that's a really good one. I thought that his covering of Pope St. Gregory the Great and Honorius was also quite good. But I think the best thing is the tone. It's a tone that is welcoming, and it's a tone that comes from understanding. It's not a detached understanding of. It's not a detached understanding of Orthodoxy's view or Catholicism's view. It's somebody who deeply understood both and wrestled with these questions that come up. If you go to your basic catechism class in Roman Catholicism, the Pope figures heavily in it, at least theoretically. And so it has, I would say, like, I've often referenced psychology and emotion when dealing with apologetics. And this has that because of the author's experience. So it's really like, again, as an experienced apologist, this is to me like reading like Father Aiden's pocket church history. But that's not what makes the book special. What makes the book special is that it's written from the perspective of somebody who understood being Roman Catholic and ultimately realized the facts were not on his side, and that he had to humble himself, repent, and return to the church. So I think that alone will have value. But his arguments are solid on the biblical case. His arguments are fairly solid on the ecumenical councils. It's a good one thing that this works well to do, even though it's not the title of the book. But you could have easily titled this "The Early Church and the True Faith," and this works as even a basic history book. But it does cover the Apostolic Fathers and the councils, and it touches them fairly well. You can see it goes through certain epistles, and it addresses the epistles. So it asks questions. Here's like an example here. He's quoting even Catholic apologists like Patrick Madrid, James Lacutis, and so he then takes the quotes and then puts them in context. This is something that for us is secondhand, but for somebody who's not experienced in this, they would get to see that the real context of, say, St. Clement or St. Ignatius shows an Orthodox position as opposed to a Roman Catholic one. And that's, I think, where the real value comes in, is that it's not just putting things in context, it's putting things in context without, and I'm guilty of this, without the, aha, you didn't understand this because you didn't read the whole context. I can do that all day long and have, but this doesn't do that. It presents in a way like, maybe you misread this, and consider this. And so it's an appeal as much as it is a historical argument.
All right.
So again, the link to the book is in the description. The ebook is $6. And the paper copy is $12, and that's, we all know that's a pretty low price for a book. He's written a lot of other books, which of course I could go on about forever, but this is not a show about Islam, it's a show about this book. So with that, I'd like to say thank you for thanks to people listening. I just saw this. Yes, it does have an internal mic. Why? What's happening?
Well, yeah, maybe the internal mic might have better sound quality if you just default to it.
I tried it. This is as good as it gets. I'm gonna have to just figure out a new way to do this. In any case, no worries. But in any case, go out and get the book. I highly recommend that to all of our listeners. I will be putting this on Odyssey, and I will be putting this on Gab TV. Again, the link to the book is in the description for Uncut Mountain Press. If you haven't already been there, they make a lot of high-quality Orthodox books, and I'm glad to say this is one of them. So, in that case, I don't know. Did you have any other questions about the book or anything? Or
no, I think you covered it as good as we can.
All right, awesome. In that case, I'd like to thank everyone for listening. Thank those who are reading, and thanks to Robert Spencer for writing a fantastic little apologetics book that we enjoy. Have a great night, and thank you for calling. Thank you for listening. And for those ending the fast, many years, we're almost out of there. Have a great night, everyone, and take care.